what you do and everything. Or
Yeah, so I'm Hannah, and I'm currently doing a doctorate in trauma psychology, which is a real interest of mine, particularly around the area of how addictions and trauma are very much entwined.
Someone to hold our hands. Everybody needs some kind of refuge, something to run to, someone who loves you. I'll be the light guiding you through the night when the stars just refuse to shine. And I'll be your shelter, that safe place to hide, your sanctuary.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Everyone's Addicted. Today's guest, Hannah, has graciously come on to share her experience and knowledge with addiction with us. So, welcome, Hannah.
Hi, it's great to be here, Jasmine. Your podcast is absolutely brilliant. I've listened to quite a few episodes now.
Well, thank you. But anyhow, let us know what you do and everything. Or
Yeah, so I'm Hannah, and I'm currently doing a doctorate in trauma psychology, which is a real interest of mine, particularly around the area of how addictions and trauma are very much entwined.
oh
I'm
yeah,
a
I was
therapist.
just saying that to my mom.
Yeah, and I'm a therapist as well, and I have a real keen interest in what we term modern day addictions. So when we think of addictions traditionally, we're thinking of, drugs and alcohol and things like that. But I have a real interest in gambling, pornography,
Yes, gambling. That's one for
food
me.
addiction, food addictions, and the way that technology is enabling these so much more to be so much more accessible.
Mm-hmm. It really is because, like what we talked about earlier, that's how like his gambling addiction became so bad because it was so accessible on the phone. He didn't have to go anywhere or anything like that. He was just constantly doing it on his phone without me noticing, right?
And I think when it starts off, certainly here in the UK, we have lots and lots of advert commercials on TV for gambling apps, but they portray themselves as games. So they'll say,
Mm-hmm.
come and join the game, be part of the game. And there are ones that are specifically marketed at women, and they tend to use the word community. So they'll say, be part of the community, come and join the community. And then there is a disclaimer that says when the fun stops, stop. But by the time it stops being fun, you can't stop.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So,
funny
it
because I had a woman do this to me yesterday, and obviously I'm angry about gambling, and she wouldn't stop, and she kept saying the same thing, like you said. Oh, it's a game, and it's a community, and it's so much fun, and I'm like, I hate gambling. Sorry.
Yeah, and
I
we are
see.
being completely lied to, and even young people now traditionally to go into a gambling place like a casino, you have to be over 18, or certainly in some places over 21. But anybody that's got a smartphone can access these gambling platforms now, which is really, really dangerous. And in the UK, we don't have a huge amount of therapeutic intervention available for people. It's quite a new thing,
We
and
don't
it's going to
either.
be no, it's an explosive addiction, and there isn't really anywhere for people to get help. Certainly not from statutory services.
Hmm. It's like they have the other groups. I can't mention their names or anything, but they have all the other groups for the other addictions, but that
Yeah,
one they do have groups, but they're very hard to find. It's not
yeah,
very
yeah,
accessible, like you said,
yeah.
right? So I like obviously I have a reason to be interested in this, but I love that you do that because it is so explosive, like you said. It's like
It is.
I even remember when I first got a smartphone. It wasn't a gambling app, but you had to pay to progress in the game. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
remember
yeah.
I maxed out a credit card of like $400 doing that because I was sucked in, right?
Yeah, and it starts off with very small amounts. It'll be like I don't know, $6 or something.
Mhm.
So it's incremental like that. And, we've all got the potential to be accidentally sucked into this stuff.
Well, and even just like social, like I know it's not even just gambling when it comes to technology. It's so many other things too that
Yeah,
like keep you from getting things done, I find, and keep you from being present if you have children and you're like
yeah,
texting and you're not listening to them. I felt that guilt, and it's made me realize that it really is just why do I care to text this person when my child's trying to tell me something? Like it's also an addiction. Like it's
yeah,
yeah, like the modern
yeah.
day addictions are not talked about. So that is so great. Like
No,
what
and
other ones do
and
you have?
so I, you had Joshua on in your most recent episode talking about his pornography issues, and so that really was where I started to develop my interest in modern day addictions. So pornography again, there are more people certainly in the UK that struggle with pornography than there are that struggle with drugs and alcohol.
That's
But because it's so
crazy.
hidden,
I
it's
the
hidden, stigmatized. Again, people don't know where to go for help. And, quite shockingly, there's very little difference in the number of people who profess to be Christians with a pornography issue than there are people who aren't Christian. So there's very little difference in that. And I try really hard not to use the words addict and addicted, because my stance on this is, why wait until you're at the point of addiction before you look for help? And that's really important. And, certainly when I was training, I had one client and he had gone maybe like 3 years without looking at pornography, but every single day he was consumed with the desire. But just because he hadn't done it didn't mean he wasn't free. And sobriety isn't freedom unless you deal with the underlying issues. So I don't focus on, I work with porn addicts. I say I work with anybody who wants to address their relationship with pornography.
that then you know what? Then it makes it more comfortable for the person coming to you because then they don't feel like they have that stigmatized name, label, whatever you want to say. So
And
that is
there
so
isn't
important.
Yeah, there isn't, it's very difficult to actually diagnose pornography addiction because it's done on a scale. And you might have somebody that is continually accessing pornography throughout the day, but then you might have somebody that hardly does it, but just doesn't want to do it and doesn't want to have it as part of their life. So I work across the board with people that want to address their relationship with pornography and also with people who really are in the grip of the
Hmm.
stronghold.
Because like you said with some of the people that I have had on here, they have said that pornography has been like such a big thing, especially with the last person who was with the Amish. As soon as they got a hold of a cell phone and seen
Yeah,
what there was out there, it just created so much, like from what she had experienced, so much
yeah,
like just needing it because they did like, it's I myself, I don't know, my stance, I don't really have the time, I guess, but like I and it's good that it's like before you like you do people like because there's times like with my own mental health before I ever had any addiction, I did try to seek help and figure out what my issues were, but it went undiagnosed for so long that I obviously used other things to cope. But when
yeah.
somebody's pre-looking for help, the fact that you're actually helping them is amazing because
Mm,
then they don't have to go down that dark road because it's not fun.
yeah. No, no, it isn't. And actually, that's another area that's a real interest of mine, is co-addictions and how easy it is to flip between one or the other. Or, I've had people that have stopped drinking overnight, but then suddenly become obsessed with going to the gym because they see that it's a better it's a
Hmm.
better outlet. And yes, you're absolutely right. Health and fitness is really
But
important,
then they
but
get
we're all,
really into it. I've seen that
yeah, And
Yeah.
I'm also seeing a huge increase in a particular eating disorder called orthorexia, which is an obsession with healthy food. And
Okay, yeah, yeah.
that's
Even
really come through.
podcasts nowadays, it's all about eat healthy, do this, no gluten, this and that. Like I 100%, yeah.
So again, it's these things that are playing out for people. When we think of eating disorders, we generally think of anorexia and bulimia.
Hmm.
And I think now there are about 12 different diagnosable eating disorders, but we tend to still
Really?
think of anorexia and bulimia. But yeah, so that's a big one where, people are just becoming so fixated on that. And I think a lot of it is due to Instagram and
Hmm.
influencers and things like that. That does play a huge part. But what we're coming into is people having very compulsive and addictive beliefs and behaviors, but it's not all about drugs and alcohol anymore.
Nope. And I love that you're addressing this because I've thought like that's kind of everyone's addicted because we don't know how to cope. So even if it's
No.
a positive addiction, per se, like going to the gym a lot, it's still something that you're using to take your mind off of whatever it is that
Yeah.
you can't cope with, right? And that like usually leads back to mental health issues, right?
Yeah.
And that is like why going undiagnosed is a big problem, and that's why the prevention is very important. And the
Yeah.
fact, the knowledge that we don't realize that there's these other, well, some of us do and some of us don't, but a lot of people don't realize that there's more addictions than just drugs and alcohol. People, when they think
Yeah.
about addiction, they just think drugs and alcohol, but it's not at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, so looking at things like behavior change around these kind of things and beliefs as well, are really important. And then another thing that is absolutely prolific, and I know it's just as bad in the States, is the increase in obesity, because we can get food delivered to our houses within 30 minutes on an app 24 hours a day. So people aren't even having to leave the house anymore to be able to access what it is they're using to comfort themselves, whether it's food or alcohol or, like we talked about, the gambling and the pornography and things like that. So it's just so accessible. And I'm writing a book at the moment. And one of the chapters, I did a chapter on attachment and a chapter on trauma, because traditionally those two have been major catalysts in addiction. But the new kid on the block is opportunity, and
It's
having that opportunity. And I
everything
think
is at your fingertips.
going back to what you said about speaking to somebody from an Amish community, as a parent, I have adult children and I have younger children. And the biggest mistake that I've made as a parent was actually protecting my children from online harms, but failing to educate them. So by the time they got smartphones, it was just hitting them in the face. And I
Hmm.
hadn't actually worked on educating them and teaching them about what to do if they're exposed to this kind of thing and how to cope with it. So I've been able to completely change how I parent my younger children by actually educating them and not just saying, no, you're not having this, you're not having that.
That's important too, because like you said, if you're on like somebody I spoke with wasn't educated and that's what led them down a darker path. And it was lack of education, and that was before online even. But like with my children, I try to do the same thing because my daughter has a father who is well, both my kids have fathers that are addicts and they know to some degree about it. So because I've had to be honest, otherwise, if I shelter them, then one day they're just going to find out, and that's going to create PTSD or trauma or something. So I try my best for their age level to help them understand what things are, right?
Actually, I was going to say the most, it is the age appropriateness of things is very important, isn't it? And just making sure that it's at a level that they can understand.
Well, especially with my 8-year old because she's starting to ask questions, right? So I have to watch how I answer them, especially when it comes to sexuality, right? So I have to
Yeah.
really watch how I respond when she asks me because she is only 8. And I remember kids like that had older siblings would tell they're like the ones that were my age stuff, and then that's how we would find out about it. And we were far too young to know this, but the older siblings told them, and then they were excited to tell us. And I'm worried that that might happen with her. So I try to explain it on a level, like you said, where she can understand enough. Like she like
Yeah.
what she knows, like she like keeps asking me when she's gonna get her period. I'm like, you're 8, so in a few years, like, but that's what I mean by questions because they're just things
Yeah.
that she doesn't quite understand, but she does to a degree. And another thing I did was I allowed one of our cats to have kittens so they could kind of see the birth process in a way that is sort of educational but also kind of fun. So that's something I did to kind of teach them about sexuality, right?
Yeah, and I think, certainly in schools, there's so much focus when they look at, personal and social development. There's a lot of focus on sex education, but there's very little on the things that are going to really matter in 5 years' time, such as, gambling, pornography,
Mhm.
food and eating related issues, and those kinds of things. So there's a real lack of education in those areas at the moment.
Well, even a friend of mine, I was at like a kid's birthday party and she was saying like, "Oh, my son's put on weight and he's aware of it and he feels ashamed of it." And he's 12, and I'm thinking to myself like, he doesn't need to feel that way, you know what I mean? Like just talk like she's not talking to him about it, he's feeling just bad about himself, you know. So if you're expressing that to me that he said that to you, what did you say back to him, right? And she was just like, oh well, we'll put you in soccer. Okay. Right, like doesn't address his feelings, you know.
No, and it's very, very different with children and young people and these kinds of things because it is going to affect their self-esteem and their own kind of level of mental health, but at the same time as adults we're responsible for what goes into our fridges and what goes into our cupboards and what goes into our children's mouths, so
That's
we
what she was
cannot
saying.
put the emphasis on the child. It's all about education, parents and children.
That was the one thing she said she was going to try to do to curb it was to make sure that they only have healthy food in the house. Like she
Yeah.
had been doing that, but they had like the little snack hidden cupboard where he figured out where it was. So, you know,
Right.
kind of,
Yeah.
she's like, I'm taking that and I'm removing it because that's where the problem lies. They come home from school and they sneak into the snack cupboard and go on their tablet and hide from mommy and eat that stuff, right? So that's how that,
uh,
it's hard, right? Because they get all this
yeah.
candy every holiday. Like, and you're like, well, I don't wanna throw it out, but realistically, it's not healthy.
No, 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 that's right. And, I think we are underestimating the impact of what life is going to be like for children and young people, just even in the next couple of years, and how what they're exposed to is going to affect them long term. When you look at the suicide statistics, we are more connected now as a society than we have ever been. Instant access, we don't have snail mail anymore. You can call somebody in Australia and see their face, those kinds of things. Of loneliness has gone through the roof at the same time, and the numbers of people dying by suicide has gone up. So there's something really, really wrong here.
Yeah,
We're
because
connect, we're
that's what I was gonna
connected,
say. Why there's so
we're
much
connected.
connection.
Yeah, we're connected, but we're not connecting.
Hmm.
And that is going that that plays a huge part. And I think also just overexposure as well. We are exposed to everything now, whether we like it or not, in our news feeds and in seeing reels popping up and that kind of thing. Um, and that is definitely going to play a part in how people develop their thoughts and what they see as acceptable or not. We're so overexposed to
It's a
everything, whether it's sexual content or violent content and those kinds of things, and that is really going to affect young people in their kind of moral compass around what they see as being right or wrong.
even like I will admit, like I get envious when I see other people like traveling and doing all these things I wish I could do. And I feel
Mm.
like then my children see that kind of stuff too, and they're wondering, oh, why can't mommy take me to Disneyland? Like that kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? So I like feel like technology is we really gotta like need more people like you that can guide us down like the right way of going about it because it is so in your face and there's so
Yeah.
much of everything. Like it's so hard.
Yeah, that's right. And I think certainly, one of the pieces of work I'm doing at the moment for my PhD, um, a lot of the um, information that's coming back through my data collection is around self-esteem, um, and how people are feeling. Um, so how people are feeling compared to when they're looking at, they've got a window into other people's lives, haven't they?
Mhm.
And that is really coming back in the data collection is around self-esteem. But I think one of the things we haven't talked about just in terms of pornography is, women are hugely underrepresented in what's available to support women, either women who are struggling in their relationship with pornography or women who are experiencing incredible levels of betrayal trauma being in a
Mhm.
marriage with somebody who is using pornography because there's nowhere for them to go for help. And they blame themselves. They'll say, I was in one betrayal trauma Facebook group, and a lot of the conversation was around, I need to have a breast enlargement because my husband looks at material of women with bigger breasts in it. And those are the lengths that people are going to. And the impact that pornography use amongst men is having on women is just devastating. It's devastating families, it's devastating relationships, it's devastating young people. And we're really not looking at it for what it actually is.
Perspective, if you do have a problem with it, it's almost harder for a woman to admit that than a man, I guess, you know? Like
Yeah.
I
And
just
actually,
from being a woman myself, I feel like it would be.
yeah, and if you're married to somebody that is battling with pornography, who do you go and talk to about it? Because your
I am
perception of that is that it's you, if you weren't
not
better,
good
then
enough. You're not good
yeah,
enough.
yeah, exactly. And so there's that blame and that stigma attached to it as well for women. And it's just a horrible, horrible situation because people tell themselves that, oh, it's just a bit of fun and I'm not hurting anyone. And that's the biggest lie ever is I'm not hurting anyone.
Hmm. I had an ex, but like I had an abusive kind of relationship with him, so I didn't really want to have relations with him. So he became addicted to porn because I didn't want to sleep with him. So for me, it was like I would go to bed and I could hear him listening to it, and like I I like, didn't feel bad about myself because I just didn't want the
Yeah.
trauma of sleeping with him. But there's a TV show that I watched where the woman's husband had a pornography addiction, and she asked to have an open marriage because he would not sleep with her. He like refused to sleep with her. So they ended up having an open marriage. It was like a television show that I watched. And just like she did all the things. She got the boobs, she got the butt, she got the lips, she did everything possible to get him to like sleep with her, and she like throw herself at him and he would nope, he wanted the porn. And that right there explains why like she wanted like she obviously did all of that stuff to herself because he made her feel like she was ugly, you know, and she probably looked better before, to be honest. Her name was also Jasmine. That's probably why I watched the show, but yeah.
Actually, Jasmine, I really need to pick you up on something because you said that he became addicted to pornography because you wouldn't sleep with him. And that is actually utter crap. He became addicted to pornography because he made that choice and he
Mhm.
chose not to invest in you and your relationship. So you
That's
cannot
true.
you cannot be held to blame for somebody else's choice. He made that choice.
And the worst part was just
Actually,
hearing it, like hearing it.
your reasons for not wanting to have a sexual relationship with him were completely justified if you were in an abusive relationship. So
Well, that's the thing.
you cannot be held to blame for that at all.
I yeah, I'm just I love that you said that because a lot like he could have just played video games. He didn't need to be doing that. And then having to hear it while I'm laying in bed because he's in the other room right beside me is kind of, I don't know, traumatizing because I'm hearing all these things and I'm like, oh, like, and like you said, if he wouldn't have been the way he was, I wouldn't have felt the way I did. So it's, yeah. And like you said, that's the thing with women. We blame ourselves so much because we don't know what else to like. It's such a new thing that, or it's just, I don't think it's new. I just think it's not talked about, right? And we need to talk about it because there's so many women that we need like support groups just for that, because
Yeah.
if we all if like have experienced it in one way or another and it does affect your self-esteem, even like you said, like it probably did affect my self-esteem if I look back upon it because he could have just played video games. He didn't have to do that, and he could have, instead of yelling and screaming at me and doing the things that he would do, be nice to me, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, like I've said, is people just say, oh, it's just a bit of fun or it's harmless or I'm not hurting anybody. But the number one reason that men under 30 visit their GP or physician in the UK is because of porn-induced erectile dysfunction. They've spent so long being exposed to pornography that by the time they actually get into a meaningful relationship or get married, they can't get an erection. And it's all due to the exposure of pornography.
It's just eye-opening to hear these things. I'm sorry, I'm just like, wow, like that. That's just wow. I wonder what the doctors think when they hear this stuff. Like,
Yeah.
wow.
And one of the things I hear particularly from young people is this attitude of I'll stop when I get married, or when I get married I'll stop doing it. I'll do it until then, and then it'll be fine. But actually, by the time you get to that point, you can't stop, and it's become embedded in you as something
Mhm.
that you have this perceived need around. And habits are really important because something will start off as an occasional habit, and then it will go into a more frequent habit, and then it will go into a compulsive behavior or an obsession, and then it will become an addiction. But
Uh-huh.
all of these modern day addictions start off as a habit.
And they start off as, well, for me anyways, it started off as coping mechanisms, right? Like ways to deal with really hard things going on in my life. It was like, well, I'm gonna pick up alcohol, for instance, and, you know, not have to think about it and get blackout drunk and then have to the next day have huge anxiety and apologize to everybody because I got drunk because I was upset over fighting with probably that man I'm talking about, right? And like that in itself is all stems from the pornography.
And I mean, I had a very problematic relationship with alcohol for over 30 years. And you can always find an excuse to drink. If you've had a good day, have a drink. If you've had a
Yep.
bad day, need a drink. And also we tell ourselves, oh, I need a drink. I
The
need a cigarette.
reward.
Need, yeah. And so certainly with alcohol, there's always a reason to do it. And that is a big thing. And particularly, the changes that we're seeing with people being able to get alcohol deliveries. I mean, here in the UK, you only used to be able to get an alcohol delivery if you got a food delivery. Whereas now you can, at the touch of a button, you can get the alcohol just delivered, no food. So it's really enabling things like daytime drinking, particularly amongst
You don't
women
have
who
to
are
leave. You don't have to
a
drive. You
day.
don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, and that's playing a huge part in the increase of alcohol use amongst women, and certainly daytime drinking as well.
Well,
Is the
like I remember my friend being at my friend's house and like she was having people over, so she ordered wine, and I was like, that is just so accessible. I get glad that I don't drink anymore because if it was that accessible when I was younger, holy cow!
Yeah,
I
yeah, absolutely. And
sometimes.
we're just not prepared as a society for what's going to happen as a result of all of this stuff.
Well, that's what's scary about the future is that, like you said, all these new age things that have come out, especially like with technology and things being at your fingertips. There's so many new, I don't want to say addictions either because they start off like you said as a habit, but there's like having a phone, like, and like I said, texting instead of being present. Like it's just so easy to do things that we don't really we regret afterwards even, and at least some people acknowledge it before it gets too bad, but a lot of people, because it's so accessible, just
Yeah.
fall down that hole, right? And
Well, it's
like,
like a drip feeding effect, isn't it? You just don't realize it's a problem until it becomes a massive problem.
but like you're the first person I've talked to who has like actually talked about like new age addictions, because I like that, and I've talked to a lot of people, so like this, I mean, needs to be talked about so much more, and just education, like how on cigarette packs they have the warning labels. I think they should have that on alcohol bottles. And like with pornography, that is a really hard one to like stop. And it's scary with children. Like with, I'm worried about like what's gonna happen with my son. Like I'm gonna have to really, really figure out how to teach him the right, like, do you know what I mean? Teach him about it in the proper way, because my daughter, she's more into just watching makeup videos and stuff. My son right now just likes to watch Minecraft videos because they're 5 and 8. But 5 years from now, what are they going to be doing? And I'm going to have to learn how to teach them the right things. And like I said, nobody else has talked to me about this. And that even as parents, we need to be more informed of all of these things because our kids, too, right? We don't
Yeah,
want
I mean, parenting in a digital age is really, really challenging. And we often believe that giving a child a phone will keep them safe, but there are more predatory sex offenders behind a screen than there are standing on street corners and lurking down dark alleys. When you look at the crime statistics now of children being exposed to online harms from people that are predatory sex offenders, particularly targeting children,
to.
proportionally much more are online than contact offences out in the streets.
Well, I watched a documentary on this actually, and it is like out of control. And like, because children think they're talking to somebody their own age. And so this was like a documentary about a group of people that were trying to catch predators. So they would talk like they were children back to somebody they kind of had a feeling about, right? And that's how they
Yeah.
would catch them in like doing this stuff. But it really is eye-opening to see that like they're everywhere, and like that they're so good at pretending to be like 10 years old, when realistically they're like 45. Like, and children aren't trained enough with like understanding people's personalities to pick that up. Well, I'm trying to teach my daughter that kind of stuff, but the best I can, because like I said, I right now have age controls, and they can only be messaged by people they know, and I have control over that, but that's not going to last forever. So like I don't know how long the age is, because I think it is at 10 that they're allowed to have their own messenger on, like that
Yeah.
kind of stuff,
And I
right?
think it varies, certainly in the States, it varies from state to state as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and like I don't know exactly what the age bracket is, but I feel, well, I think it's 10, because because I'm staying at my mom's house. We're in a granny suite. My friend lives in the other side of the house, and his daughter's 10, and she told me that she's seen me on TikTok. So I'm like, the age restriction must be 10 because she's 10, right? And the rest of them are all younger and they don't have access to that. So I'm like, it must be 10, but I mean, she could have lied about her age. I don't really know, right?
And what's happening with children and young people, like I said, is that their exposure to this kind of thing is normalizing it and is making it okay. So that children and young people are just being immersed in these online worlds and being exposed to all sorts of things which they won't see as harmful.
Hmm. Do you have like your own practice right now, or are you just working
I
on school?
I do, but what I've done is rather than seeing one-to-one clients, I'm developing quite a few on-demand digital packages. So I
That's
have one, yeah, I have, and it just means I can help more people
that's what
wherever
they
they are.
need.
So, and it's really good. So I have one called Quit Porn, which is absolutely brilliant. That's a 52-week long on-demand digital course. But actually, in the next 6 weeks, I'm doing a 30-day Kickstarter for people. So that will be an intensive 30-day program, really based on habit changes rather than looking at the underlying issues. It's really important. It's very easy to change a habit if you do things properly, but it's sustaining it in the long term where you really have to look at the underlying issues that have caused you to to radiate towards that behavior in the first place. So I've got the 30-day Kickstarter launching in the middle of June. Yeah, middle of June, which is brilliant. So that's www.quit-porn.com. And there's free resources on there as
I'll put
well.
it in the details as well, just so that
Free
everybody can find it.
Yeah, there's a free 30-day trial of Covenant Eyes, which is the number one accountability and porn blocking software. So people can try that for free to see whether or not that's something that they'd like to have. You can put it on, I think, all sorts of digital devices, so iPads, laptops, phones. And I think they now do a family package, so you can have it on all of your household devices and not just one person.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so there's free resources on there and things as well. So yeah. And then
And yeah, I
my
was gonna
book
say I know you have a book.
yeah, so it's called Quit Porn. You don't have to be addicted to want to break free, which is kind of my strap line, which is being published in August. So I'm very
That's
excited about that.
exciting.
And yeah, and it's actually being published by a US publisher because most of my clients are actually in the States.
Hmm. That like I'm actually in Canada, and when I had a separate business that I don't do anymore because I went back to school, and yeah, most of my clients were from the States too. So I get what you're saying. I just feel like people reach out more, I guess, in that country. Like I don't know, right?
Yeah, I mean, what I know is that in the States, therapy isn't as stigmatized anyway. Everyone has
Yeah,
therapy, everyone
everybody
goes for
does.
therapy. Whereas here, yeah, and here it's still very, very stigmatized. So
There's
I do feel that the culture in the States is a lot more advanced than the culture here in terms of getting help. But the difficulty that I found when I was working with one-to-one clients is that often they come through the door because they've been told that they have to.
hmm.
Their partner or their wife will say, if
Yeah.
you don't get help, I'm going to kick you out or I'm going to divorce you. So, and that's quite difficult working with somebody that doesn't have a genuine desire to change.
Because you won't
Oh,
change unless you do have a genuine desire. I know this from going through my alcoholism, like relapse after relapse, because I just didn't get it yet. And like until I got it, it didn't click, And so like I would just continue to do it or sneak it or do whatever because I was just like, I'm not an alcoholic. I still function. I still go to work. So, like
yeah. I mean,
I was
it's
like,
very
my
easy. It's very easy to minimize our behaviors and say, oh, well, I don't do it that often, or we
Mhm.
find a reason to do it. Oh,
Yeah,
I had a
an
bad day
excuse.
and things like that. And I mean, certainly in my own relationship with alcohol, in the UK, our our kind of when we think of somebody that's an alcoholic, we think of somebody that's sitting on a bench in a park, drinking high alcohol,
Same.
cheap cider, maybe looking a bit disheveled. And I used to say to myself, well, I'm not an alcoholic because I buy my wine in a high-end grocery store. And that was my excuse. But actually I was probably consuming more units of alcohol in one evening than somebody sitting on a bench in a park drinking all day. But it's what we tell ourselves as
Hmm.
our means of justifying the behavior. And that's what, when you look at the rigorous honesty element of recovery, that has to be really addressed is what lies have we been telling ourselves that we've been believing to enable the behavior?
Well, for me, it was I worked in restaurants, right? So, like, after work, everybody would line up at the bar. So I'm like, well, it's okay. Everybody else is doing it, but nobody else was drinking as much as me. Nobody else was drinking, continuing to drink the next day. And you know what I mean? So I justified it because, oh, everybody at work's doing it, but they're not doing it to the degree that I am. So, right? But like that's what I mean by with you having people get sent to you that aren't ready to quit. That would definitely, I don't know how you work with them, honestly.
That's kind of why I've done the online program, because what it does is once somebody's bought it, they then have lifetime access to it. And that's really
That's good.
important because, you might have found this yourself when you're kind of working through a program and your heart's not really in it, you just can't engage in it. But to have it taken away could also be quite detrimental. So to know that it's there sitting when you are actually ready to make that decision, I think is really important.
I 100% agree. Do you have anything that you want to say before I let you go?
No, but it's been absolutely amazing to be part of your podcast. I've listened to a couple of episodes and I really like the breadth of the guests that you've got, and that it's not just all about drugs and alcohol, because we're seeing so much more that these things are completely entwined. Even
Mhm.
having clients that say, oh, I only look at porn when I've been drinking, and things like that. So, we know now, and the evidence tells us that very often somebody that is in some level of addiction, there'll be a co-addiction as well.
And just so you know, I'll put all her links in the description. So if you ever want to get a hold of her or do her programs or when her book comes out, read her book, I will have all of those links available for you. So thank you so much, Hannah. I am so appreciative of you coming on and really talking about these new age, like I guess addictions. I don't like I said, I don't like that word either for what we're talking about, but new age things that are just so not talked about but needed to be talked about. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's been great, Jasmine. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. Have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you.